Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive, where we take your sources and turn them into, well, hopefully some useful knowledge nuggets for you. It was the final day of the Premier League season, wasn't it? Always a day just packed with drama, unique stories unfolding all over the place.
Absolutely. That final match week, it just has a different kind of energy, you know?
Mhm.
Every single result, every moment, it can swing things or just confirm where teams end up.
And for this deep dive, you've given us a very specific source, the official match report for the game between Wolverhampton Wanderers and Brentford. This was Saturday, May 25th, 2025.
That's the one. Yep. Our whole focus here is just on the details, the stats, the analysis, everything that's captured purely within the Premier League website's report for this specific fixture, nothing else.
Right. So our mission then is to really dig into this document, understand exactly what went down in that 1-1 draw at Molyneux, figure out the context and the consequences as the report lays them out, and pull out the key insights this specific report offers for you. Ready to get stuck in?
Let's do it. Okay. Setting the scene, just like the report does. It was, the final match week, 2024-25 season. Saturday, May 25th, the place was Molyneux Stadium, and the official attendance was 31,382.
And the report immediately paints a picture of what was on the line, which, well, it was pretty different for the two teams involved.
Yeah, for Brentford, the whole story going in, according to the report, was about European football. Their hopes were still technically alive. But to make it happen, the report says they absolutely needed a win at Wolves, and they also needed other results to go their way.
And then on the flip side, you had Wolves. What was their motivation, according to the source?
For them, it was mainly about pride. The report specifically highlights they were aiming to snap a pretty rough run of 3 straight defeats, just end the season on a slightly better note.
Okay, so the final whistle goes, and the score, as we said, 1-1, a point each to wrap up the campaign.
Point each, exactly.
Let's get into how that scoreline actually happened then, focusing strictly on the goals and the key moments described in the report. Brentford scored first, didn't they?
They did, yeah. It was in the 20th minute. Mbeumo got the goal. And the report traces it back to a mistake by Wolves at the back.
Oh, okay. What kind of mistake?
It says Ryan Aït-Nouri was dispossessed. Yohan Wissa pinched it off him. Wissa's shot then took a deflection, ricocheted off to Christian Nørgaard, who then sort of squared it quickly to Mbeumo, and he finished it from pretty close range.
And that finish, the report points out something significant about it.
It does. It notes that it was Mbeumo's 20th Premier League goal of the season, which is, a really strong return.
Yeah, 20 goals. That's a fantastic individual milestone for him. Definitely something the report would highlight.
Absolutely. Marks a really successful campaign for him personally. Now, the equalizer for Wolves, that came much later in the game. 75th minute, Marshall Munetsi.
And the build-up for this one. The reports give much detail.
Yeah, it sounds pretty dramatic, actually. It involved a long ball played forward, which was flicked on by Jurgen Strand Larsen, who'd come on as a substitute for Wolves. Munetsi gathered the flick on, and then, well, the report uses some strong language here, says he rifled a volley into the top corner.
Rifled a volley. Okay, so quite a strike.
Oh, yeah. The description in the source, it really doesn't hold back. It calls it a thumping strike and even says Munetsi's magnificent first-time strike was worthy of winning any game. So, really high praise embedded right there in the official report.
Wow. So if we look at the match flow then, based on those descriptions, you've got an early goal from an error, and then this moment of, well, brilliance for the equalizer much later. What does the report suggest about the general pattern of play in between?
Well, it kind of implies Brentford took advantage of that defensive slip-up to get ahead, but crucially, the report also notes that after falling behind, Wolves actually responded pretty well. In fact, it explicitly states that Wolves looked the side more likely to score from then on, sort of implying the pressure was building before they eventually got that equalizer through Munetsi's stunner.
Right. Okay, let's shift to the consequences then, especially for Brentford, because European qualification was hanging in the balance for them. What does the report actually say about what this 1-1 draw meant?
It's very clear on this. The report states that their hopes of securing European football for the next season ended with this result. Period. It even recaps the, frankly, pretty complicated set of conditions they needed to meet.
Which were?
They needed to win at Wolves, plus they needed Chelsea to lose away at Nottingham Forest, which would have seen Chelsea finish 7th, plus they needed Chelsea not to win the UEFA Conference League final later on. A lot had to fall into place.
And presumably, news from those other relevant games was filtering through during the match.
Yes, the report actually mentions this. It says the mood kind of shifted among the traveling Brentford fans when word came through that Chelsea had taken the lead against Forest.
Ah.
And it also notes that Brighton were winning comfortably against Spurs, 4-1 in the end. So the report basically concludes that by the time Munetsi banged in that equalizer for Wolves, Brentford's European dream had already become academic, is the word used. The results elsewhere weren't going their way, on top of them not getting the win they needed themselves.
So a definite end to those European hopes for the season. Was there any sort of consolation prize mentioned in the report for Brentford?
Yes, there was. The report does highlight a positive takeaway. It mentions them achieving the club's second top-half finish in 4 Premier League seasons. They ended up in 10th place. So that level of consistency is noted as a positive.
Okay, decent finish then, even with the final day disappointment. What about for Wolves? What does the report identify as the main significance for them in getting this point?
For Wolves, the key positive that the match report pulls out is ending that losing streak, stopping the run of 3 straight defeats. It was clearly framed as, salvaging some pride, maybe regaining a bit of momentum after a difficult patch, and making sure they didn't end the season with 4 losses on the bounce.
And you mentioned that equalizer involved a substitute making a quick impact.
Absolutely, yeah. And the report specifically calls this out. Jurgen Strand-Larsen, he came on in the 65th minute, and just 10 minutes later, he provided the assist for the goal. The report notes that he made a difference after coming on.
Sounds like the report might be hinting that something positive for the manager, Vitor Pereira, may be looking ahead.
That seems to be the underlying feeling, yeah. The report notes Pereira will be pleased. His side managed to halt their losing run, and it sort of presents this point as something to build on as he heads into his first full season in charge. Although it does also mention they dropped a couple of places on the final day, finishing 16th.
Okay. So beyond the goals and the main narrative, the report usually includes other specific details. Did it mention any yellow cards being shown?
It did, yeah. Listed 3 yellows. Jean Gomes for Wolves got one in the 35th minute. Then Yohan Wissa for Brentford in the 60th. And finally, Nelson Semedo for Wolves picked one up in the 72nd minute.
And that section, how the match unfolded, often gives little snippets of other chances, moments that could have changed things but didn't result in goals. Anything noteworthy mentioned there?
Yeah, quite a few, actually. It mentions Keane Lewis-Potter going close for Brentford early on. Yohan Wissa was denied by the Wolves keeper, Jose Sa.
Okay.
Then for Wolves, Matthias Cunha had a volley saved by Mark Flecken in the Brentford goal. Nelson Semedo also had a volley saved later on. Ryan Aït-Nouri forced a save from a tight angle, and Gonçalo Guedes apparently scuffed a shot wide when he was quite close in. So yeah, despite only finishing 1-1, the report suggests there were definitely other opportunities created.
Sounds like it could have gone either way, potentially. And the substitutions, they always tell a bit of a story about how managers are trying to influence things.
Yeah, definitely. And the report details quite a few changes. For Wolves, we already mentioned Strand-Larsen coming on for Guedes in the 65th minute, and Rodrigo Gomes came on for Aït-Nouri at the same time.
Right, the double change.
Yeah. Then later on, Munetsi, the goal scorer, was replaced by Mbeumo in the 86th. Matt Doherty came off for Jean-Rickner Bellegarde in the 87th. And even the keeper, Sa, was subbed off for Dan King right at the end in stoppage time.
Interesting. And for Brentford?
Brentford made changes too. A double swap in the 80th minute. Mikkel Damsgaard and Kevin Shadoff replaced by Matthias Jensen and Nathan Thiago. And then Michael Keown came off for Christopher Ager in the 86th minute.
Okay, lots of late changes. The report also sometimes throws in season stat highlights for key players involved. Anything mentioned there?
It does, yeah. Top scorers highlighted were Mbeumo, obviously, with his 20 goals. Wissa wasn't far behind with 19 for Brentford, and Matthias Cunha led the way for Wolves with 15.
Good numbers. Assists.
For assists, Damsgaard was high up with 10, and then for Wolves, both Aït-Nouri and Bellegarde registered 7 assists each across the season. And it also noted tackle stats João Gomes leading with a huge 116 tackles, followed by Andre for Fulham, who wasn't in this game, but presumably nearby on the list, and Aït-Nouri again with 89.
Fascinating to see those individual season stats pulled out in the context of this one match report. And just quickly, did it provide any context from the head-to-head record or recent form?
Yeah, briefly. It noted that the head-to-head in the Premier League was perfectly balanced before this game, 3 wins each in their previous meetings. This draw makes it 3 wins each, 2 draws in 8 games. And form going in, well, it wasn't great for either side. Wolves got this draw after 3 straight losses, and Brentford also got a draw here after losing their previous game.
Okay, right. Let's try and pull it all together then, based purely on what this match report tells us. What's the kind of core takeaway from this specific 1-1 draw at Molineux?
Well, this 1-1 draw, as the report portrays it, it pretty much served two main purposes. It confirmed the end of Brentford's push for Europe this season, and it gave Wolves a much-needed point to stop their losing slide and maybe find a little bit of stability.
So the immediate consequences highlighted in the report are quite clear. For Wolves, it's framed as finding something positive, something to build on under Pereira. For Brentford, it's the consolation prize, I guess, of another solid top-half finish, even though the European dream died on the final day.
Exactly that. It's really a snapshot, isn't it, of where each team landed at the very end of the season, captured through the lens of this single game's narrative and outcome.
So here's a final thought then, based purely on how the report frames things. You've got Brentford securing their second top-half finish in 4 years, suggesting a certain level of Premier League establishment. And then you have Wolves ending that losing streak, getting a point the report describes as something to build on under their manager. What does this single match report, this specific final day result, perhaps suggest to you about the potential trajectories, the ambitions, maybe even the underlying moods of these two clubs as they look towards the next season?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It definitely prompts you to look beyond just the 1-1 scoreline itself and think about what these specific moments would take. The error, the wonder goal, the confirmation of league positions, the end of streaks, what all that, as documented in this one report, might actually signify for where both Wolves and Brentford are heading next. Something to ponder.